Welcome to Podcast Like It's the 2000s, the podcast where we talk about the films of the aughts here from our perch in 2024. I'm one of your hosts, Phyllis Cove.
I am your other host, Emily St. James, and a fun fact about me is that I am the commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix Legions, loyal servant to the true Emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. That's a fun fact about me.
I love that about you.
I always suspected that about you, you know?
Yeah. And she will get her revenge, but it's just a matter of time. With us today to wrap up our mini-series on the 2000 Best Picture nominees is writer winner. You are a winner in my eyes. I was like, my brain was like, winner, Best Picture. Anyway, writer, podcaster of several podcasts in the Ringerverse, Joanna Robinson is here to talk Gladiator with us. Thank you so much.
Wow, Gladiator.
How it's
exciting.
A movie that everyone's talking about right now. And I'm so glad that we get to talk about it next to its sequel counterpart 24 years later, which is pretty crazy to say. Yeah, I mean, this movie, so I reached out to you, Joanna, and I sent you the whole list, and you were like, Gladiator. That was your out of the gate, you were like, Gladiator. Is Gladiator is it one of your favorites? Was it your Best Picture pick that year? Would you have picked it of those five?
That's so funny. I remember that I did that.
Okay.
I just am not 100% sure why I did that. Did you send me the list of Best Picture winners from the year 2000?
I sent you a list of a bunch of movies that we were going to cover. Okay. And you picked Gladiator.
Here's my real guess. And I hope you don't feel used. I was like, I'm going to have to watch Gladiator anyway. So I'll pick Gladiator because I'm going to have to watch it in prep for Gladiator 2 anyway. But also, would I have, of the 5 movies that were nominated that year for Best Picture,
yes,
would I call it my favorite or the best? No.
Okay.
But I'm not salty about it as a win, unlike it finds its way on that list along with Crash and other things that belong there. But I was in college, freshman year of college when this came out. I had the best time. I saw it with everyone in my dorm, and we just went to go see Gladiator, and then we all wrote all of our essays to the Gladiator soundtrack for the rest of the year. We were just playing in the dorm room was perfect, rousing. I got to get this 10th page done. So yeah, I mean, I really think this is an incredibly solid blockbuster. Actually, quite good looking, despite some of the 2000 special effects film, and a film that establishes Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix star making big leading men star making turns for people who I consider some of our best actors. So did that answer your question in any way, shape, or form?
It did, and I think it's similar to how I feel about it. Emily, I'm curious. I know you rewatched it, obviously, and you're sort of two minds on it.
When this won in 2001, because the Oscars are, this always bugs me, but you know what? It's fine. It's fine that the Oscars, people call this the 2001 Oscars when it's not. But anyway, this won in 2001. That's when it was named Best Picture.
Correct.
And the calendar year of 2001.
Yeah, the calendar year. And I was pissed. I was just absolutely, completely angry about that. And I watched it again this time, and I'll spoil my ranking. It's 4th out of 5 for me out of the 5 nominees. But I also was like, okay, fine, it won. I had a good time. I think it's a perfectly fine movie. And I think it is. The things that make it a Best Picture winner are also the things that I kind of don't like about it, if that makes sense. I like it a little bit more as a visceral action thing, and a little bit less as a serious drama of Roman politics. But those two things do work in concert in a way that I think they kind of don't in all the movies that followed in this movie's footsteps, including its sequel.
Yeah, I was watching a TikTok of your home, The Ringer, The Big Picture. Sean Fennessy was talking about Gladiator 2.
Correct.
With 2 of his cohorts. And they all kind of seem to land similarly on that movie, which is that it's kind of Like I think it's pretty overtly campy. Like I think it's like Ridley Scott just like giving zero fucks and just trying to have fun type thing.
Hmm.
But I also think that people put Gladiator on a pedestal that I don't totally understand. Do you know what I mean?
I
Like, I think it's a fine movie.
The person that I most like talking about movies with is my personal trainer because he sees everything
Hmm.
and he is not plugged into discourse at all. So he'll
Hmm.
just have takes and I'll just be
Yeah.
like, what the fuck
Right.
is this? But like I was telling him, I just, because when I saw Gladiator 2 and then I went to my personal training session, I said, I just saw Gladiator 2. He's like, I think I'm going to see that tonight. He was like, the guy before you, Gladiator's his favorite movie of all time. And I was like, I cannot fathom of someone who Gladiator is their favorite
I
of all time.
I kind of get it because like if you saw not that I endorse it and I agree with you, I would also rank it either third or fourth among the best picture nominees of that year. So
Yeah.
I think we're of like a similar mind, but like what if you were the exact right age?
Yeah,
We
sure.
were all, I think, a little old, but what if we were the exact right age and it
Yeah.
was like action cinema with like but Oliver Reed and Derek Jacobi are here. You know what I
Mhm,
mean? With like
mhm.
the sheen of
Right.
prestige to it. And so you could convince yourself as like, I presume a teenage boy, but let's like whatever. And then you're like, this is the best movie that has ever existed. This movie, they fight literal tigers, and also
They
Oliver
do.
Reed is here. This is cinema, you know? And so I can kind
Right.
of see how you get there, even if I don't share that opinion. You know?
It,
I will say though that Richie loving it on The Sopranos is kind of the thing that my brain kind of goes to a lot of like a very sort of like, and you're seeing a lot of this now with the sequel of like it's not masculine enough, right? Like the first one was this like overtly masculine thing, and
mhm.
now you're seeing in the sequel, which by the way I don't think lacks masculinity in any real way, but there is sort of more nuance to the characters, I would say, in terms of some of their sexuality and what have you. But like, I think this movie hit with not just kids and teenagers who are like, this is
Yeah.
cool, but I think it also hit with like, I hate to say it, but bros. You know what I mean? Like, I think it speaks to them too.
I think a lot of people watch this endlessly with their dads, and that just
Sure.
like
Hmm.
Sure.
that just like forever colored their feelings on it and their feelings on the proposed audience for this. It's like this was never like a cable movie for me, but it sounds like it was for a lot of
Right.
people, and that's great. I'm happy
It
for
is on a
them.
lot.
Yeah.
It's on TNT. It feels like continually.
Oh, it's somebody's Shawshank. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, and I'm like watching movies with my dad. Like that's how I think about Breaking Away or The Great Escape. Like there's something about
Sure,
those
sure,
movies
sure,
because I
sure.
watch them with my dad that they are forever something in my mind. I think that's a great point. But I also think that like to your masculinity point, that's interesting. I hadn't heard. So there's a critique going around that Gladiator 2 is just not for the dudes enough.
I this is circulating quite a bit on some social media where I
Okay.
feel as though it's there's a couple things that I think are feeding that narrative. I
Okay.
think Paul Mescal is not Russell Crowe, right?
Sure
Like he's
isn't.
just not. They're completely
Yeah.
different, just like vibes.
Mhm.
Not to mention the films and the work that Paul Mescal has done over the last few years is much more emotional and all
Mhm.
of that, right? Then mixed into that, you do have you have the two kings, I guess, the
The
sort of whatever,
emperors.
the
Yeah.
emperors, my
Mhm.
apology,
Yeah, yeah. How
that
dare you?
are
How dare you?
not
God, the
that are
gods
not
among us. Yeah.
necessarily, but that are cut from the same mold as Joaquin is in the first one. So
Yeah.
I don't feel as though it's drastically dissimilar. It's just there's two of them now, so maybe people are just like noticing the sort of whatever you want to call it about their sexuality. I don't think that it radiates gay to me personally, but maybe some people read it that way.
There's a fayness to them. I
Sure.
certainly read it as queer coded, but
Okay.
that
Okay.
is in the realm of how the like sort of upper classes were portrayed in classic epics. Like if you've watched the Ten Commandments, it's like these very like sort of
Yes. Yes.
swishy
Yes.
performances, for lack of a
Yes.
better word, which is like not explicitly gay, but like that was like a way, a lot of
Sure.
homosexual actors would play those parts and then like really camp it up. And it feels like Ridley is paying homage to that in both of these films, but it feels like now in 2000 people were not as aware of that as they are now. Joaquin is doing that, but like people were not talking about it in the same way.
But I also think like, I mean, it's no secret that during the Roman Empire, there was just a lot more, it just gender and all of that sort of sexuality was just a lot more fluid. Like people just didn't give a shit.
I really liked someone was asking Denzel, by the way,
Yes.
the Denzel Washington Don't Give a Fuck press tour.
Incredible.
Exquisite. Um,
Exquisite.
but someone was asking about the line because he has some line about women or men or women or boys, something that he says. And someone was asking, they're like, are you saying, is your character supposed to be like queer, bi, whatever? And he was like, oh, he would fuck anything. He would have sex with anything, and he would eat it. He would do anything. He would eat anything. He was just sort of like appetite, appetite, appetite. Like it's yes, but like also we're not trying to say anything about that. We're just in this world, and absolutely. And I think to your point about camp, like Joe Quinn and Fred Heschinger are like doing this campy thing as the emperors, but Denzel,
He's
who
going
I think is by far and away the best part of Gladiator 2,
100%.
is in the Oliver Reed role, is not bringing the Oliver Reed machismo to it at all. He's like, I've been doing Shakespeare for decades and I know what I'm doing here and I'm going to do that. And so like, I think that brings a different, but like, what would we do without Denzel doing that in this movie? What is left for us
in the movie?
to enjoy,
There'd be nothing. It's this is part of why I think that Gladiator is a better film than Gladiator 2. Like just as a film, I think it just holds together better. I think it's just, and we'll talk about the myriad of insanity that happened in terms of the production of this film of Gladiator, which it's a miracle that what came out on the other side was coherent and that that it worked. But it's a testament to all the players that they made something that was just very clean and very easy to understand and just kind of like just nailed it. And I think the sequel, and we're not just going to talk about the two movies the whole time, but I do think that the sequel is it's just kind of a bit of a cash grab and kind of a just like, we can do this. And Ridley knew that they'd give him $1 bazillion to do it, so he could do all the things that he couldn't physically do on the first one that maybe he wanted to do. And it just scratched an itch is what it feels like to me, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think the movies that where Ridley Scott does the things that Gladiator does well, even better, are the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven, which for me is like one of his top 5 films, and then The Last Duel, which is in the same vein. It's not quite the same, but it is like that has better character writing than I think this movie does. That said, what this movie has that none of those have is fucking Russell Crowe as like a star-making performance, and like that does like that gives you a whole like star and a half right there.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Totally agree, and I think something that like the two of the things that really hurt Gladiator 2, and I also promise I won't just
no. We'll like, talk about it,
but like everyone's talking about the fact that there's like beat for beat plot turns that are copy pasted from the first movie, which is not a deal breaker necessarily. It's just not done in an interesting way at all in this film. Mallory, my co-host, and I were talking about this, about like that there are some sequels that do this, like The Force Awakens. I like The Force Awakens, but The Force Awakens did this, or there's a few other like big blockbusters that you could think of. Top Gun Maverick does this, but like they kind of do it in a way that is commenting on like either cycles in history or the long shadow of legends, or like what it means to be the son of a father, all this sort of stuff that like Gladiator 2 sort of faints at but doesn't actually engage in any meaningful way. And then on the Paul Mescal front, the like, is Paul Mescal a movie star, or is he like, why did they have him do a Russell Crowe impression? That's just like so confusing. He's doing a vowel sound, and Russell Crowe is of course like Australian through the lens of British accent through Roman Empire, like whatever he's doing in Gladiator is so distinct, and so he's trying to match that, and I'm like, whose idea was this? And then who saw him do it and said, let's keep doing it like this? Like it just does him a disservice.
I think Paul, weirdly, when I was watching it, I found myself, I was like, what does he sound like? Who does he sound like? And I actually think he sounds like Daniel Day-Lewis in Last of the Mohicans.
Oh, stay alive. I will find, I'm trying to hear it.
Yeah, there's, and I think it's because, I mean, they're both Irish. I think that there's a lilt and something in the way that they do American or something. I don't know. I agree with you that Paul's doing an accent, which I don't think is well advised. There's something about it that's weird. I think ultimately the Russell Crowe of it all is like he had a real ascension, right? Like he did have LA Confidential and The Insider prior to Gladiator, right? And both of those movies were lauded. Both of those movies had Oscar nominations. A lot of people feel like he should have won in '99 over Kevin Spacey. I think we'd say almost any of the nominees should have won over Kevin Spacey at this point. But I do think that those steps, you know, to becoming a movie star are so important. And I think with Gladiator 2, Paul hasn't had those steps yet, in my opinion, as great as he's been in the things that he's been in. And also, it seems as though they cast Denzel to you know what I mean, to balance out the like he's not a movie starness, which I think is also doesn't do him any favors.
But also cast Pedro Pascal, which
Correct.
is like, you
Correct.
know, the movie's that movie's great flaw is it has essentially 3 protagonists and can never settle on one of them at a time. So
to answer your question, Joanna, about like ascension and whether or not movies, you know, I would agree with you that we are. My hope, and I had this conversation actually with Griffin Newman many months ago about sort of how there is a new generation of young stars that could very well turn into movie stars. Some of them already are. I would say Zendaya is already a movie star that people are going to see movies because she's in it. And I think that basically the cast of Dune 2 are all probably going to be movie stars and are in varying degrees. Where that goes and how big that goes is really kind of anyone's guess. But you know, it's interesting. I went to see Twisters obviously earlier this year to talk about Paul's counterpart in Daisy Ridley Jones or Daisy Edgar Jones.
Edgar Jones,
Ridley, yeah. And I do feel like that movie almost does her more favors than this does for Paul, right? Like, I think there's so much expected of Paul in this movie that he is going to take this movie on his shoulders that I just think is kind of unfair to some degree of where he is in his career right now. Whereas like Daisy gets to be in Twisters, it's a big hit. It's basically a two-hander with her and Glenn Powell for all intents and purposes, and it kind of works to her benefit.
Yeah, but then she also did that Crawdads movie, and I just need everyone.
But that was
to
a
remember, hit. I just need to remember that everyone remember that existed because I saw it, and I need people to remember. Okay.
The one thing against Daisy Edgar Jones and Twisters is a lot of people are like, I don't believe she's from Oklahoma. Great. I'm not sure she's ever been outside before that movie. Like, Paul Mescal, say what you will about him. I know he's left his house.
Yes,
so.
It's true. It's true. I want to give a little bit of context for Gladiator, the film we are here to talk about.
Oh, are we here to talk about the first one?
Yeah, we're going to talk about Gladiator.
Can we talk about Twisters more?
We can talk about that too. Set in Roman times, the story of a once powerful general forced to become a common gladiator. The emperor's son is enraged when he is passed over as heir in favor of his father's favorite general. He kills his father and arranges the murder of the general's family, and the general is sold into slavery to be trained as a gladiator, but his subsequent popularity in the arena threatens the throne. Gladiator opened on May 1st, 2000 against U571, Frequency, Where the Heart Is, The Flintstones, Viva Rock Vegas, and Love and Basketball.
Yes, we used to live in a society. We used to live in a society.
I kind of love all those movies.
I
Even
know.
Viva Rock Vegas.
I know.
Like, it just, yeah. It would go on to make $465 million on a $103 million budget. This was a pricey movie. It would go on to get 80% on Rotten Tomatoes from critics and 87% from audiences. It was nominated for Best Picture, Director, Actor, Original Screenplay, Supporting Actor, Original Score, Cinematography, Art Direction, Editing, Visual Effects, Sound, Costume Design. It would go on to win Best Picture, Actor, Visual Effects, Sound, and Costume Design. It's the first Best Picture winner to not also win either writing or directing in 51 years up until that point. Chicago would then 2 years later.
Yeah, so mad.
Wait, so what did 2001 Emily want?
2000's Oscars, you have Soderbergh winning Best Director for Traffic.
Yeah, no.
But what did I want?
What did you
want? I wanted Traffic to win Best Picture. 2024 Emily wants Crouching Tiger to win.
Yeah.
But like I still prefer Traffic to this movie, but it's close. Yeah.
No version of Emily wants Chocolat to win.
No version of Emily wants Chocolat. No.
So Chocolat was the first film we covered on this miniseries. And I saw Chocolat back in the day. Like, I worked at a video store and I took it home one day and I watched it for reasons that still escape me. Emily had not seen Chocolat, so Emily went into
It's
Chocolat
one of
just
the
like
few Best Picture nominees of the 21st century I had not seen, and
Oh
I
my
just like I
God.
watched it and was like, what is this?
Yeah.
it's really strange. It's a
It's
very strange
it's
movie.
Harvey Weinstein, is it not? Isn't that
Yeah,
not what
100%.
that movie is?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like you
Yeah.
look at it's probably the other nominees probably Billy
Yeah.
Elliot or Almost Famous, and you're like
Yeah.
either of those is a better choice.
Without question.
Billy Elliot and Almost Famous are two of my favorite films of all time.
Yeah, like I mean, Chocolat is a movie that quite frankly doesn't exist. Like if you actually went up to people and like, so there was a movie that was Footloose but with chocolate. And
No, it's like Water for Chocolate, but French. And it's
and less sexy.
and yeah, way less sexy.
I have encountered a surprising number of people who like that
Hmm.
movie and
Wow.
have it fondly as like they're all like white women
Yeah.
in there who are either like
Yeah.
late boomers or early Gen Xers, so they're
Yeah.
like in a very specific time window.
I know
But they
that.
do love that movie, and they are like, this is
Yeah.
one of my faves ever, and they like own
And
it on
Cynthia
DVD.
Erivo, who put it in her top 4 on Letterboxd.
Yeah.
So
Cynthia.
there you go.
Yeah.
She's already because she's already like, I'm trying to run this Best Picture campaign.
Yeah.
I gotta get some old faves in
Get
there.
some
and
old
white
women on
Chocolat.
I
board.
gotta get the wine mom vote. Chocolat. Put it in there.
Yeah.
Put
But
it in there.
I'm going to read a small snippet of Ebert's 2-star review of Gladiator. A foolish choice in art direction casts a pall over. It's insane. Ridley Scott's Gladiator that no swordplay can cut through. The film looks muddy, fuzzy, and indistinct. Its colors are mud tones at the drab end of the palette, and it seems to have been filmed on grim and overcast days. This darkness and a lack of detail in the long shots helps obscure shabby special effects. The Colosseum looks like Rome from a model in a computer game, and the characters bring no cheer. They're bitter, vengeful, and depressed. By the end of this long film, I would have traded any given gladiatorial victory for just one shot of blue skies.
I will say this. I normally I go and read old reviews, and this time I
Yeah.
didn't because I just didn't have the time. But my wife watched this with me because we were gonna go see Gladiator 2 the next day together. And she was like, this movie looks like shit. Like that was her overriding. She was like, this movie, and it's all of the criticisms Ebert had. She ultimately liked the movie, but she was like, it
Interesting.
looks like everything's kind of
Okay.
gray,
Yeah.
everything's kind of brown. It is like if you compare it again to like the Ten Commandments, the Ten Commandments bursts with
Sure.
color.
Super colorful.
Yeah, this kind of looks like a computer game in ways that work for it largely, but it is like kind of colorless in a way that I think ends up boosting its mask appeal. But yeah,
Mm-mm. On the one hand, I agree. Like, certainly the tiger fighting looks like a video game, and certainly like the wide shots of the arena where they digitally filled out the
Yeah.
crowd looks like a video game. But I think maybe it's because I watched this after I watched Wicked, which is quite washed out and blown out, and Gladiator 2, which I think is like deeply ugly. And then I went back and watched this, and there's some it's not all of it certainly, but there's some setups with like Connie Nielsen and Joaquin Phoenix inside of their like, royal quarters or whatever that actually is like beautifully lit.
Mhm.
So there's like some stuff where I'm like, this is prettier than Ridley eventually found himself capable of. Like,
Yeah. The interiors are largely well lit. They're
Yeah.
largely well done. I'd say that's also somewhat true in the sequel. I think this movie and The Lord of the Rings are like an important stopgap in CGI, where like CGI is good enough to do a lot of things, but they still have to do like Lord of the Rings famously has lots of like insert shots of like, now we're cranking this thing. And they did all that with like real props. And
Mhm.
once CGI takes all of that over, it gives effect to weightlessness. But this is a period when CGI is getting good enough to do a lot of that, but it's not yet good enough to really do it in close up. So you
Mhm.
have to mix the two together. You see that in the tiger fight, where it feels like there are a couple shots where it's either a real tiger or like they've done like digitally animated a photo of a tiger in close up, especially. And like that helps sell it, even though every time you go out to a wide shot, you're like, what the fuck is this? This is like
I think that Arthur Max's production design in this film and in the sequel are pretty magnificent for all, you know what I mean? Like just in terms of the sheer scope of
Mhm.
trying to take on something like this. And I think that's part of its mass appeal in 2000. I think it's part of why it wins Best Picture is that it just felt big, and it felt like those old sword and sandal movies. We obviously had a whole resurgence of that came off of this movie, your Troys and what have you. Which is Troy fun, because Troy's getting like a resurgence online, which I'm just like, what are we writing for Troy now?
Troy's bad in a fun way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was in college when Troy came out, and my English lit professor had like a meltdown
Yeah, I
in
bet.
class about Troy. And I still remember him like in his tweed and elbow patches being like, Brad, buddy, get out of the tent. Get out of the tent. That's what I always think about when I think about
I just think it's interesting that I agree with both of you guys that like this movie, Gladiator, the first one, it's very beige, it's very brown, it's very sandy, and which is not particularly exciting to look at. And I do think that the new one attempts to bring a little bit more color, even if it's just sort of in the water that they put inside the Colosseum, in just sort of like trying to give it a little bit more of a splash of color. But I also think
bloodier too. Like there's
it's
so
much
much
bloodier.
blood.
Yes,
and that helps. Yeah.
The opening sequence of Gladiator, that first battle sequence, right, kind of becomes Ridley's go-to, right? Because all of his battle stuff kind of looks like that one now, and not necessarily in a bad way.
What if things were blue? Yeah.
What if things were blue or kind of gunmetal or kind of like steely looking and like bleached out, so it's all kind of got that sort of, contrasty kind of vibe. He plays with shutter speed. He plays with like frame rate. Like that opening battle kind of rules. I genuinely was like, am I gonna love this movie? Like, because I thought it was fine in 2000. It's the last time I saw it was in 2000. So
his Robin Hood, which I won't ride for, but which I defend more than most people, it all looks like that.
I'm sure it does.
One thing I think is I wanted to talk about a little bit is I did a whole piece a couple of years ago at Vox, which you can read. I believe the title is "Colors. Where Did They Go?"
Was this the Ozark article as well?
No. It was a genuinely like a big, like large, like investigation, and the rise of digital color grading. The first film to entirely be scanned to be digitally color graded is Pleasantville in 1998, which of course they had to do to like make things black and white and then pull color in and all of that. And then like you start to see it happening. The Matrix famously gets a new color grade for DVD, which now most people only think of The Matrix. If you watch like a 35 millimeter print of it, it has a different color grade than the one you could get at home. But like this in 2000, the first really big influential color grading job is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
I was gonna say, they sepia wash it.
They tug it all in, they sepia wash it. This movie, I think, it doesn't get enough credit for being an early, like everything is tinted, everything is like washed out in a certain way. And Traffic, of course, which we've already watched, has a similar thing, but Traffic is more deliberate about how it uses those filters. But yeah,
those are filters, not those aren't done in post. That's like in camera stuff.
I was just thinking about the visual, like if you are 2001 Emily or someone else who's like pissed that Gladiator has won Best Picture, and so you're thinking about these other movies and you're like, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen. It's so lush. It's so just like incredible to look at. Traffic, I would not say is incredible to look at, obviously, but like to your point, intentional, like that's an intentional, I'm going for something here. And I can't say that I would think, and I know, Phil, that you're going to get into some of the like fly by the seat of their pants filmmaking that went on here, but I can't say that I feel like much of Gladiator feels intentional. It feels like accidental that Russell Crowe can hold the center of this movie. It feels accidental that Joaquin Phoenix manages to like channel his like very nerves about being on this film into this very nervy, insecure performance and all of that sort of stuff. So
I will say that in watching it, I of course had the Oscars page open, and I would be like, the production design, I was like, this is genuinely great production design. It sometimes gets lost behind the color grading, but whatever. And like I was like, well, what did it lose to? And it was Crouching Tiger, and I was like, well, I mean, but it is like, the Oscars it lost, it tended to lose to better movies. I love Joaquin in this. I think Benicio's better in Traffic. I love I think that this movie has really fine score. It's just the Pirates of the Caribbean score, except it happened before the Pirates score. So technically the Pirates is, but like,
It's crazy how
the
much he's
yeah, the
it's
Crouching Tiger score is so much better. It's literally just like the only thing where it won the Oscar, and I was like, yeah, okay, sure. It was Russell Crowe. Like he would not have been my pick, but like I
yeah.
can't deny him, you know?
Well, so since we're talking about this, let's dive into this just very, very quickly. Best actor nomination for this year is Russell Crowe for Gladiator, Javier Bardem for Before Night Falls, Tom Hanks for Castaway, Ed Harris for Pollock, and Jeffrey Rush for Quills. So it's not the greatest batch. Like I
Obviously Jeffrey
still
Rush for Quills.
I mean, I probably, if I'm being honest, if we're talking about my favorite performance of these five, it's Tom Hanks and Castaway.
Oh God,
Yeah.
I don't like that movie. I'm like,
That's
I'm
fine.
alone on an island of not liking that movie, but I am there.
That's fine. But
I
the other nominees, I have not seen Before Night Falls.
Oh, he's okay. So
Okay.
my
Okay.
my actual choice of who's the best of these five is Bardem.
Yeah.
He's phenomenal in that movie.
Okay.
That like makes him who he is. Like that's the Bardem ground zero.
Yep.
My like I'm gonna vote for just like the technical skill is Tom Hanks, but I have no problem with Russell Crowe winning in a way I would have
Sure.
It's
if it
also
had been Jeffrey Rush and Quills, you know.
yeah, you look at I don't know, when I do like long lens Oscar wins,
Yep.
I like to think about like who deserves an Oscar and who should have an Oscar for their career.
Yep.
And like Bardem got his Oscar, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? And like Hanks already had
For an iconic performance.
Hanks already had two Oscars.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so it's just like this is Russell Crowe's
Jeffrey Rush had one.
yeah.
You know,
This is
Ed
Russell
Harris
Crowe's
is the only one who doesn't get it.
Oh, Ed.
Ed, maybe Marcia Gay Harden lets him visit her Pollock Oscar. It's just sort of like we can share it, Ed. You know, like
Yeah, that's a weird win.
It is still
I mean-
staggering to me that he didn't win for the Truman Show. Like that just felt
yes.
like
Yeah.
Oh God,
it was going to
so
happen.
good.
And then it was Nick Nolte, or well, no, James Coburn.
James Coburn.
And I think
He's great in
I'm-
Apollo 13 as well, by the way.
I know.
Milk Money, Stepmom.
Milk
know
Money,
what?
anyone?
If you had given the Kevin Spacey Usual Suspects Oscar to Ed Harris for Apollo
Yes.
13 and the Kevin Spacey American Beauty Oscar to Russell Crowe for The Insider, they would
Yeah.
not have, neither of them would have been my choices, but I think it's a better timeline overall. So
I would agree with you. I mean,
am glad. I am glad that Russell Crowe has his Oscar for this movie and not A Beautiful Mind. Like that's just a thing.
That's
a,
true.
Yeah.
Really agree.
and
really
people
agree.
thought he was going to go back to back. There was like talk of that happening. I mean, I do. To be very clear, Russell Crowe's great in this movie. It's a movie star performance. It's, the movie doesn't work without him. When
Yeah.
you hear him talk about the production of this film,
Mhm.
which I will just get very briefly into, basically Russell Crowe talks about how they had 32 pages of the script when they started shooting. So they barely had anything. They had shot through those 32 pages in the first couple of weeks. Crowe claimed that the script was substantially underdone. He talks shit about the script basically all the time. He says, called it garbage, claimed he's the quote unquote greatest actor in the world, that he can
Okay.
make garbage sound good.
But I hunted down that quote because I was like, did
Yeah.
Russell Crowe really say that? And it's like a tabloid article where the
Okay.
screenwriter said that Russell Crowe said that. And I'm like, do
sure,
I believe
totally.
that Russell Crowe said something absolutely
Close
like
to it?
egomaniacal? Yes.
Sure.
But I don't think he said he was quote the greatest actor in the world.
I
maybe.
appreciate you fact checking me on that, because I did not search out the quote. I
But
mean,
I bet he was a dick to that screenwriter. I absolutely believe that is true. But
Well,
also in that same article,
Mhm.
in that same quote, oh no, according to a DreamWorks executive, I might have pulled this from the same place you
Sure.
did, whatever. Crowe tried to cut the line, "In this life or the next, I will have my
Yes.
vengeance."
Yes.
So, okay, Russell Crowe. He's like,
No.
the
Like-
script's garbage. Let's get rid of this very famous line. I don't want to say it, you
If-
know?
It's just yes. Okay.
There's I don't remember where I read this, but somebody's like, when you're judging Oscar performances against each other, it's kind of fun to ask yourself the single best scene and the single worst scene. And like his single best scene is that thing where he delivers
Yeah.
that monologue, and it's a movie star moment. It creates a career for him. I think if I'm picking out the best scenes of everything else, I think it's better than those because it's just so awesome. But it is, yeah. If he wanted to cut, I will have my vengeance. Then frankly, he should go to hell. So,
I just think it's interesting that this script starts with a writer whose name I just want to make sure that I get it correct is David Franzoni, who is also got a credit on the new one because of character names. Franzoni writes
an Oscar for this, and Ridley Scott does not,
which is crazy. Isn't that crazy? So Franzoni writes a screenplay for Amistad back in the day. Which was exactly Spielberg. Obviously, it's his first film for DreamWorks. Blah blah blah. Amistad doesn't obviously do all that well, but Franzoni basically does the elevator pitch to Spielberg of this Gladiator movie, and Spielberg's like, "Yes, great, let's go do it." So that's essentially how this starts. DreamWorks then puts producers Walter Parkes and Douglas Wick together. They show Ridley Scott a copy of Jean-Léon Gérôme's 1872 painting Police Verso, which Scott says portrays the Roman Empire in all its glory and wickedness. He was so captivated by this picture, he agreed to do the movie not having read the script, just saw this picture.
Correct.
Which tracks. So everything about that makes sense.
People have said yes for far flimsier reasons.
It's kind of the David Lynch in the last scene of The Fabelmans, but like Ridley Scott version.
Yeah. So then Scott felt that Franzoni's dialogue lacked nuance, brings on John Logan to do a rewrite of it. So then Logan does a whole rewrite and basically puts in all the stuff for revenge, for lack of a better way of putting it, basically killing.
He's like, you need a dead wife. You don't have a dead wife. What are we doing here?
He needs a want song.
No fields of wheat. What are we doing?
So apparently the other actors that were considered before Russell Crowe was locked into it were Antonio Banderas, Mel Gibson, and Tom Cruise, which I guess all sort of makes sense.
I think Cruise would have been awful, and I like Tom Cruise. He wouldn't have been good.
I think Mel would have been really good, as much of a shit bag that he is. I read that Mel turned this down because he was 43 and he's like too old.
I also think this movie reminds me a lot of Braveheart. Like, I know that they're not a one-to-one, but like
a dead wife is a dead wife. You know what I mean?
Dead wife's a dead wife, and fighting, all that sort of stuff. It's just there's a part of me that feels like there's a little similarity there.
The people who put this on the worst best pictures of all time list should have Braveheart there instead, because Braveheart.
I agree. Yeah, Braveheart's not great. Braveheart.
No,
I'm not a Braveheart stan. Jude Law auditioned.
You had it on your Sight and Sound top 10, Phil.
How dare you? Jude Law auditioned for Commodus, my apologies, which I think is interesting. I don't know what that would have looked like. Obviously, Joaquin gets the role.
Great, but Joaquin is more of a sicko. But Jude would have been great. He would bring that like Dickie Greenleaf energy,
That's true. Jennifer Lopez auditioned for Lucilla.
Hey,
which is interesting.
Good. Yeah,
could have been good. I mean, I would have. Yeah. Basically it was a shit show, but they pulled it together. Russell Crowe later admitted that he initially felt unworthy of the praise and the Oscar that he got for it. After seeing the completed movie, he felt that it was a director's film, that the Oscar should have gone to Ridley Scott.
Sure. Nice boy. Famously nice boy, Russell Crowe.
Demure,
Demure, if you will. Yeah.
Like a shrinking violet. I think what's also interesting about something that I didn't realize until I Googled this morning, why did Gladiator win Best Picture? This is the meat in the 3 years of DreamWorks winning Best Picture sandwich. And so this idea
it wins American Beauty in 99 and then this in 2000. Yeah.
And then Beautiful Mind the following year. So it's 3 years of DreamWorks films. And so it's just like we talk about the reign of Harvey and that's like a whole thing, but this was like a brief Katzenberger dominance in the campaigning sphere. And I think from what I could tell, I that they were sort of in the Oscar campaign Q&A front, they were pushing new I don't know about you guys, but every day I get an email inviting me to a Dune 2 screening. Like right this very moment, I am confident that Denis Villeneuve is screening Dune 2 for someone and giving a Q&A. Yep. Just relentless. And so I think they were like DreamWorks was part of like really ramping up that sort of kind of campaigning. Yeah.
Which is a better style of campaigning than
And what
what
Harvey
Harvey
did?
Weinstein was doing.
Sure.
It is, it never ceases to amaze me how quickly DreamWorks kind of fell apart. And I don't know if it's because ultimately Geffen and Spielberg just weren't interested in running a studio and that the hands-on day-to-day approach that's required to do that,
Mm.
um which might have something to do with it. But it's amazing how quickly they rose to the highest of highs and how quickly they fell. It's interesting.
I think a really interesting comparison point is Orion, which did a similar
Mm-hmm.
thing in the early
Mm-hmm.
90s. Dances with Wolves, Silence of the Lambs are back to back. And then they're like out of business like 3 years later.
It's
There
crazy.
it is this like, and we're kind of in this era where like A24 and Neon are our big
Mhm.
two companies running for Oscars. And yet if either of them were out of business within 5 years, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense.
It
It's like,
tracks, yeah.
yeah.
Like clearly, what are you
Yeah.
still doing here? Yeah, but
Well,
please stay forever. Yeah.
no, please stay forever. I think what's interesting too is that if you look at like when it was Fox Searchlight and you look at their reign, right, where they were cloistered inside a studio, right? So they had the sort of protection that comes with that, right? Whereas an A24 and a Neon don't have that, right? Like they're just out there. Orion didn't have that. So it is just interesting. And quite frankly, DreamWorks didn't have that. Like there is just sort of something to be said for those independent arms, your Focus features, your Searchlights, that allow them to be able to take a handful of swings. We wish that they got more swings, but there is something there to run interference and to be able
Some
to know that you're not
protection.
gonna.
Yeah.
It's crazy. One other quick thing about this production that I love, which is that at least one historical advisor resigned due to changes and another asked for their name not to be mentioned in the credits. I think it's great. I think that clearly Ridley's not interested in
Wait,
historical
is this
accuracy.
not a documentary on how the Senate worked in,
It's not.
in Rome?
I know. It's surprising.
I
But it's true.
love that as this movie started ramping up its Best Picture campaign, of course, the press was like, well, how accurate is it? And so they did a bunch of stories, and historians would be like, this movie's not accurate at all. So for the second one, Ridley was like, now there are sharks in the arena. And it's just like, I don't
and people
give a
reading
fuck.
newspapers,
Yeah.
Emily.
That didn't bother me because in the Gladiator verse, I traveled back in time and invented the printing press and became very rich. So
Oh, that's exciting.
Oh.
That's great. I want to talk Ridley very quickly here because obviously still kicking, still making movies like right, left, and center. No one's stopping him. But at the time of Gladiator, he was at a real low point. Obviously, Alien, Blade Runner, those are in the 80s. He makes Legend, Someone to Watch Over Me, Black Rain, all are not successful. Thelma and Louise, a fucking masterpiece of a movie, just as far as I'm concerned, a perfect movie. But then he uses Thelma and Louise to do 1492 Conquest of Paradise, then White Squall, then G.I. Jane. So he's done three.
I feel like you're besmirching White Squall, one of the most important tiger beat films of all time.
I mean, they're all very pretty.
No, I'm just kidding.
And they're all sun-kissed, and God bless them. But those three movies don't duo.
I've actually never seen White Squall.
I've seen it.
I just know that every actor who was in Tiger Beat was in White Squall in a billowy white shirt.
1,000,000%.
Okay.
And another White Squall piece of trivia is that Richie from The Bear has a poster for White Squall in his apartment. So take from that what you will.
Should. As he should.
There you go. But those three films are bombs. None of them do well. It's 97 for G.I. Jane. So it's 3 years between G.I. Jane and Gladiator. So it is interesting that, they kind of pick Ridley up a little bit and they give him this huge movie to do. Not to say that they should have any reason to think he can't execute it, but it is just interesting at that point in his career for him to get it.
I remember somewhere in the late 90s in a review of some Ridley Scott movie, like this critic whose name I don't remember was like, well, Ridley Scott usually makes bad movies, but once a decade he makes a masterpiece. And this critic was referring to Alien, Blade Runner, and Thelma and Louise, and I was like, okay. And like I've always had that in the back of my brain, and like I generally like Ridley Scott stuff, but yeah, it does feel like every so often he hits another level, and most of the time he's just kind of doing his thing, and that's fine. I'm not a Scott stan, but
We're not. Yeah, sorry. Please.
Well, you mentioned The Last Duel is something that you really enjoy, Emily.
Movie.
Like,
Good movie.
okay, I'll watch it. I'll rewatch it. I watched it. I didn't. I'm just like the last Ridley Scott movie that I loved was The Martian. That
Sure.
being said, that wasn't that long ago. It just feels that long ago because Ridley Scott makes movies all the time.
All the time.
As many movies ago, but not that many years.
Well, I mean, there was a Trump term and a pandemic in between the present and that movie, so
I blacked out for like 6 years. Yeah.
We're obviously, I don't think Emily and I are going to do a Ridley Scott 2000s mini series. His 2000s are interesting. Hannibal, Black Hawk Down, Matchstick Men, Kingdom of Heaven, Good Year, American Gangster, Body of Lies. It's a lot of movies in 10 years.
A good
Body of
year.
Lies doesn't exist. That's a movie that straight up doesn't exist. If you told people that Russell Crowe and Leonardo DiCaprio were in a movie about like the intelligence community, they'd be like, no.
Can I tell you a quick story? So sorry.
Please?
In
Yeah.
2008, I guess, when Body of Lies came out, I was working for a very mean and eccentric woman in San Francisco. And it was an office, it was her and then the two of us who worked for her. And one afternoon she's like, let's just go to the movies. And we were like, okay. We were so scared of her. We were like, okay, so scared. So we like trot over to the Kabuki Theater and we go to see Body of Lies. So Leonardo DiCaprio and Russell Crowe's in it. Okay. It's like 15 minutes in, she's like, this is terrible. She's like, we're leaving. So we like walk out and we go into something else. I think it was like the Bill Maher movie, like some other movie that was playing there.
Okay.
She's like, we're just gonna watch this. And then like 15 minutes later, she's like, this is terrible. And we walk out. And then she picks another movie. We go in there. We're so scared of her. We go and we watch whatever this is. She's like, this is terrible. Never mind. Let's just go home. And then we were done with our like movie afternoon with our terrible boss.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah. So I've never walked out of a movie except for that experience. 3 movies in a row. Yeah.
I mean, first of all, that's amazing. I love that, like, kind of a sign of whatever time of year that was in 2008, when there was just nothing in theaters. But I do think that your point, Emily, about Ridley kind of nailing it periodically, like making something like I think Black Hawk Down is fantastic. I understand why it wasn't a hit. I really like Black Hawk Down.
It was like a hit. I find it, let's say, racially insensitive. That's a fun way to put it.
I'm a Matchstick Men fan.
I love Matchstick Men.
Matchstick Men's great.
Yeah.
A movie that also people don't really acknowledge. A great movie.
I also love Alison Lohman's politics. So
yeah, you don't want to know Alison Lohman's politics, Joanna. It's better to not know them.
Yeah.
I think Prometheus is a crazy weird movie, but I kind of ride for it, and I love Alien Covenant. So I mean, listen, I think Napoleon's boring. I think House of Gucci isn't campy enough. If House of Gucci was as campy as Gladiator 2, House of Gucci might have been amazing.
If House of Gucci had been as campy as its trailer, we all would have been living so well in 2021.
Or the first still we got of Adam Driver and Lady Gaga. If the movie was like that still, we'd all have been just...
Yeah. I love it for the Jared Leto performance, an actor I cannot stand. But that performance is in some like weird, like, it's like I'm a bat and I can hear it pinging off of walls. And I'm like, oh, this is where I go.
I love that. So very quickly, just to talk Joaquin Phoenix for a second here, although Lord knows we could talk about him for many hours because he's a fascinating and strange bird. My first noticing of him was when he was still Leaf in Parenthood. He's very good in that. He's then 6 years later, he's great in To Die For. A tremendous movie. I think he's great in U-Turn, a very strange movie, but I think he's one of the people that understands the assignment. And then it's like Return to Paradise and Clay Pigeons and 8mm and The Yards, like just stuff, movies that he's in.
People love The Yards, don't they?
They do.
Yeah, they do.
People ride for The Yards.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And Clay Pigeons sure was a movie that I did see.
For as much as Russell Crowe is dialed into this movie,
yes,
Joaquin is dialed in to a different movie. but a like one that is complements Russell's movie. So they kind of like vibe together, especially because they don't have a lot of screen time. I will say I forgot the final fight was Commodus versus Maximus because in no universe, including one where he's like stabbed him, I'm like, I just am like, there's no way he's
There's
dead.
no world. Yeah, he's dead.
But like that, they actually get me to a point where I'm like, well, this is interesting. I can't wait to see what happens. Is I think a tribute to their performances.
That's how I felt. Okay, spoilers again for Gladiator 2. That's what I felt like when Denzel Washington got in the water. I was like, what is 70-something-year-old Denzel Washington weighed down by the fabrics draped all over his body getting in a river to fight Paul Mescal at the end of Gladiator 2? And then I was kind of like, actually, this is kind of working.
It was working.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Whenever Denzel's on the screen, that movie's working, even if it's just like it's crazy. But I do, to your point, Emily, I remembered that they fought at the end, but I didn't remember that he stabbed him before fighting him. And that made me go like, okay, this is slightly closer to an even fight now.
Yeah.
But then you watch and you're like, he needed to like chop off his arm. Like he needed to give him like a serious wound to really have a shot, because there was no world where Joaquin was going to win that fight.
Yeah.
What is your sorry?
No, you
What
go.
is your favorite Joaquin Phoenix M. Night Shyamalan performance? Is it Signs or is it The Village? Because
yeah,
podcast where Emily just confessed that she loves Jared Leto's performance in House of Gucci. I'm here to tell you, I love Signs and I love The Village, and those are
The Village is one of my favorite films of the 2000s. I think it is a kind of a brilliant masterpiece. I think it's Shyamalan's best film. That said, I think Phoenix is better in Signs. Like
I would argue that Signs might be when he like actually became a palatable movie star, if that makes sense. He's very charming and funny in that movie, and disarming, as opposed to the little weasel asshole that he is in this movie. It was the first time I remembered when I saw that in the theater thinking to myself, this guy has some juice in a way that I hadn't seen before.
I have watched that scene of him watching the news footage. I've watched that. That is one of my favorite scares in all of movies. I've watched it a billion times. So I just have in my head, if you're like, Emily, what's a Joaquin Phoenix quote? I'm going to be like, Vamonos, children.
Vamonos, children is so good. But there's also the shot when Mel comes home and there's just a shot of the kids and him with the tinfoil on their heads, like sitting on the couch. But yeah, Vamonos, children is really good.
I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's like an underrated thing about Joaquin, which is he can be silly.
Yeah.
Yes.
He no longer really lets himself be silly, which I think is too bad. But like, there is a silliness even to his performance in Her, which is very sad and serious, but like there is an element of musicality to it that I think is sort of, even in the Joker sequel, just like it needed to be sillier, and he just won't let himself go there anymore. I don't know. Joaquin, come back to us.
It's a movie that doesn't totally work for me, but Inherent Vice, he's doing something.
Inherent Vice is peak silly, but did you guys see Come On, the movie where it's just like him and the
I liked that movie.
I thought he was so good in that. I think he's like injects a little bit of that in that, but like the Joker stuff, Napoleon.
You know what?
No, thank you.
He is really silly in Beau is Afraid. Yeah. He's willing to go kind of big and comedic. That movie doesn't entirely work. Phil, you would like it. You should watch it. But like, it's not scary. Like
I'm not gonna watch it.
He's not afraid. It's basically a movie about a guy who needs to nut, and he's willing to lean into that. So,
I do think that I really do have a tough time. I'm torn with Joaquin is ultimately what it comes down to, because he is in some of my favorite movies. I really love Her. I think I think The Master is great. I think he's very good in The Master. He has given. I think he's great in Signs. As I said, I loved him in Come On.
Where's your Johnny Cash appreciation?
I don't love Walk the Line. It's fine, but I don't love it.
How are you? Are you like dreading the Bob Dylan film?
I'm actually not dreading it, but I'm also not I'm just not a Mangold
My
person.
wife is super hype for that movie, and I can't figure out why. It's
Really?
like I can't wait.
am
She loves Walk the Line.
Yeah, I
So
Okay.
love Walk the Line. I am a
I
Mango.
got maybe I got to rewatch it. I only watched it once in the theater, and I was like, "This." Here's the thing: I don't hate Mangold. I think he's very competent. I just don't find him exciting. There's just nothing
I
about him that like gets me excited.
when I did the Screen Drafts country music draft, I rewatched
Yes.
Walk the Line, and no movie has been bodied as hard by its parody as Walk the Line was by Walk
Well,
Hard.
It's
It is
really true.
impossible to watch that movie and not think of all the Walk Hard moments that it calls back to. That said, Joaquin Reese really good in it. Jennifer Goodwin really good in it. It's just like, yeah, the actual material is
The
uh
wrong kid died. Sorry.
I
I
I'm
remember.
curious to see
Go
what
ahead.
he's like in the new Ari Aster movie, which is coming out next year,
Mhm.
Eddington, where he
Which
plays a
has
sheriff.
Pedro Pascal, who
And
is
yeah, everyone's in that movie. Emma's in
completely
that. Emma Stone's in that
wasted in
movie.
Gladiator too.
I have heard
Yes.
rumors. I don't know anything about it, but I heard
Yeah.
rumors that it's like a zombie movie, and I think that's going to be fun.
Oh, that's fun.
I love I remember when I was at the last couple months I was at the AV Club. I pitched an article that I never wrote, but was basically Joaquin Phoenix is where like Al Pacino, Robert De Niro were, whatever, where like you can't, their next performance, you just got to see it. You can't wait because it's going to be new and electrifying. And I no longer kind of feel that way about him. But at the time, I thought The Master was phenomenal. I liked him in Her. I liked him in Inherent Vice, and I was just kind of like, yeah, this is the guy. He does something different every time. I don't know that I think he's kind of obviously people he tends to like pull out of films at the last minute in a way that annoys people for obvious reasons, but there's I if he came back next year and this Ari Aster thing, he gave one of the great performances of all time, I'd be like, yeah, of course he has that thing where he could give a dozen bad performances and then give one good one, and I'd be like, of course, he's Joaquin Phoenix, he can do that.
What did you
I
expect?
think yeah, I think I mean, listen, I'm not the first person nor the last to be annoyed with all things Joker, but I do feel like I kind of hate that that's the movie he won
Mhm.
for.
Yeah.
Um, I think that movie kind of broke his brain a little bit and a lot of people's brains. I was rooting for Adam Driver to win for Marriage Story, a movie that I really loved.
The
I love
most
that.
Phil
Um,
pick.
I love that movie.
I don't
you're a
like that
monster,
movie. I
Emily.
mean, I don't hate it. But I think it's like, I think I was very disappointed by that film. So,
Well, okay. I wasn't, and you're wrong. I'm kidding. I mean,
uh,
whatever. My point more than anything is that I just think that that movie let Joaquin feed all his worst instincts
sure.
as an actor. And it's not to say that he's incapable of being good again. And the movies he's done since, there's some really interesting stuff in there, even if it's not my thing. I still haven't seen the Lynn Ramsey movie, which I should see.
Oh,
I
he's
know he's
so
very
yeah.
good in it. Like
He's
I know he's capable. I'm just
he is best when he's in service of a director with a vision, and I'm not sure Todd Phillips had a vision. I think Todd Phillips was
sure.
just like, go do crazy shit.
Yeah.
Like, by the way,
That makes sense.
he should have been in Gladiator 2 as the Joker, as like Emperor Joker. That would have been great.
Um, join me on my island of not the island where I am the only one who doesn't like Castaway, but join me on the island
Yeah.
of Inner Peace, where when I get upset that someone won an Oscar for something, I
Yeah.
just try to pretend that they won it for something else. So
Yes.
what is the
Oh,
movie that you would like to pretend Joaquin Phoenix won his Oscar for?
that's a really interesting question. Well, so what was he? This is the question. What movies was has he been nominated for?
Well, it
Doesn't
doesn't.
matter. Doesn't
That's
matter.
that's
Yeah.
not the
Oh, it
rule.
doesn't matter. Okay.
No.
Yeah. Just pick whatever.
Um, I think I'm just
Yeah.
looking right now.
By the way, I would have given the Oscar that year to Antonio Banderas for Pain and Glory. A wonderful performance
Oh,
and a
I
wonderful film.
love
Sure,
that
sure.
movie.
Yeah.
I think I might have given it to him for Her, being
Yeah,
honest. I think that
that's a
Her
good pick.
is a movie that so much of that movie is an extreme close up of his face
Mhm.
and him carrying that movie. Yeah, that's what I would. What about you, Emily?
The Master. I think The Master
Sure.
is one of the greatest performances I've ever seen.
Yeah.
He's
Sure.
like, he's just so great in that film, and he's
So
so
uncomfortable.
he's playing like there's this thing that I think that movie captures that's so difficult for film to capture, which is like loss of faith, and he plays it so well. He plays the need to belong and then the feeling of despondence when you're cast outside of that belonging. But really, like, you could give it to him for about a half dozen films that aren't the Joker or that aren't Joker, and I'd be like, yeah, sure, great, go for it, good.
Yeah, I pretend that those awards are like okay, I hate and please don't do what Sean Fantasy did to me, which was imply that I just didn't understand it. But like, I hate Three Billboards as a movie. Like, I just hated that movie.
Well, it's a
Yeah.
bad movie.
Um,
That's fair.
Get on here and fight with us, Sean. You're wrong. Anyway.
Yeah, you're wrong.
he was like, "Well, you paid too much attention to the discourse." I was like, "I didn't. I just think it's a bad movie." But I'm not mad Sam Rockwell has an Oscar. I just pretend
Oh,
it's not
sure,
for
sure,
that
sure.
movie. You know what I
I
mean?
pretend it's for Vice. So,
Oh
So
my god.
Sam Rockwell deserves an Oscar on his mantle, and who the fuck cares what movie it was for? You know what I mean?
It should be for Galaxy Quest, obviously. I mean, that's what
uh,
because he's amazing in that movie.
yeah, Three Billboards. I saw that movie at an early press screening. I was like, why are people hype about this film? And then the discourse kicked in, and I was like, yes, I am correct. But like, I just
Yeah,
didn't like it from the first. Yeah.
same.
I'm curious what you guys. I have a question for both of you, and I don't know that there's necessarily like an answer, but what do we think happened to Russell Crowe? Like, what do we in terms of his career? Because he comes off of Gladiator. He also has Proof of Life that came out in 2000, but people just like to pretend that that movie didn't exist because it contained adultery in real life and whatever. But that's neither here nor there.
It has to exist. Otherwise, Meg Ryan and Dennis Quaid are still together.
That's
So
fair. Then he has A Beautiful Mind in 2001, which is obviously a big Oscar player, makes a lot of money. Master and Commander in 2003, which he's phenomenal in. It's a great
perfect
movie, and it is a movie that weirdly is still doesn't get the love that it should, and it's getting a lot of retroactive love. But then you look at these things, and I'm just like, is this just bad agenting? Is this just him taking leading roles? Is like, what is this? It's like Cinderella Man in '05, which, okay, Ron Howard comes back to you and says, like, come do my boxing movie. Fine. That movie sucks, whatever. Then Ridley comes to him and says, come do a good year with me. And he's like, okay, fine. So he does
Yeah.
that shitty movie. 310 to Yuma, he's good in, which is a
Mhm.
good movie.
rules.
Yeah, it's a good movie. But then American Gangster kind of sucks.
I disagree. I like
Okay.
That move,
American
but
Gangster.
that move, both 310 to Yuma and American Gangster are big hits. You know, like he's,
Right. Okay.
like he's
It's
not yet in a place where he's no longer a star because he still has a big hit every couple of years. Like Cinderella Man wasn't a big hit, but it was a success. You know, I kind of like Cinderella Man. I have a soft spot for that.
really
It's a nice boxing movie. Here's a fun thing about me. I kind of have a soft spot for Ron Howard.
Oh boy. I can't wait for us to do we're gonna do
Mind?
we're gonna talk Ron Howard at some point next year. And it's
Like,
you know
A Beautiful Mind is the Ron Howard movie I like least, which is very
yeah,
strange to me.
because it fucking sucks.
But you
And
know
is
what? I do
is
love The Missing, which is his follow-up.
amazing. I think to your question, I mean,
Yes.
like
Yes.
as much as I like 310 to Yuma, and American
Yeah.
Gangster, and a number of
Okay.
I liked State of Play,
Yeah,
not as
State of
good
Play is
as
not a bad movie. Yeah.
not as good as the miniseries, obviously, but I liked
Mhm.
it. But like, and then obviously Les Miserables is embarrassing for him and everyone, and then Man of Steel happened and all that sort of stuff. But like, I think that
Noah.
oh no, um, but I think
I like
that
Noah.
I
Oh,
think
God.
um the the bad boy drunken fighting
Yeah.
journalists like bad reputation that followed him around that like has sort
Yeah.
of dissolved into mist in the background, but it was such a thing, and especially when we were
Yeah.
in just like a different era of celebrity culture, that he just had this like reputation not for being like a bad boy in the fun Colin Farrell way, but being bad boy in just a sort of like
Yeah.
what an asshole
You
kind of
look
way,
you look at
Yeah.
this run of movies and like
Yeah.
from basically from Gladiator on, and he has a big hit or a couple big hits every other year or so until the late 2000s when it's a fallow period. And then like Les Mis, for as much as people make fun of him, and it was a big hit, like
Oh yeah, yeah.
he can like he still can get people to come in and see movies, but he never had, I think what happened was he never had another Gladiator or another Beautiful Mind. As much as I don't like A Beautiful Mind, there's a level he's at there that he just never quite got to again. And like he also never had a movie star performance comparable to Gladiator, but that's because I think Hollywood just couldn't figure out how to replicate Gladiator, which it
And
kept
I have
trying
to,
to do.
when he did The Nice Guys, I think it just like
Yeah.
a perfect film. I think enshrined him
So
in
good.
like something for um film bros, and I'm counting myself among film bros, where it's just sort of
Mhm.
like the film bros leading man sort of thing. Which is a weird thing to say, but I don't know. But like, I don't know what's going on with Russell Crowe. I don't know what he was doing in Thor: Love and Thunder. I don't know why he hitched his wagon to Zack Snyder's like whole verse thing, and I don't know what's happening with like the Pope's Exorcist and like all that other stuff. Like,
Those movies are kind of fun.
okay, here's what's happened. Russell Crowe's like, I'm gonna make movies for Emily now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Emily
I like when
deserves
there's an
joy.
exorcism. That's my favorite
Okay,
thing. Yeah.
We
okay.
also didn't talk about The Mummy.
You love a Ron. What if Ron Howard did an exorcism film?
Oh my God.
I
That's
would
like,
be
oh my
I
God.
would be so happy.
Wasn't that the Da Vinci Code?
Like, yeah, this Ron Howard movie that is like based on like a real true crime thing. I read about it and people are like, this is surprisingly good. And I'm like, this kind of sounds good. And like I will never once say that like, but like there was a time
Wait, are
when
you excited for Eden? Is that what you're talking
I think
about?
so, yeah. There was a time when like people a company loosely affiliated with Imagine Films was like working on a script of ours and I was like, I hope I get to meet Ron. That'd be great.
I mean, Eden, a movie that played festivals, didn't it, Joanna? I
Yeah,
think it was at TIFF, wasn't it?
yeah.
Okay, and no
It's gonna be
one
great.
distributed
It's
it.
gonna be great.
It's
I
It's
gonna
gonna
be
be
just
great.
remember I
It's
just
not
remember that yeah.
underappreciated in its time, but give it time.
I just remember that what the
Oh
people
boy.
I read talking, I didn't know it was by him. And then I read people saying great things about it just online. I was like, what is this? And I was like, oh, it's directed by Ronnie. Of course. Of course.
Ronnie.
Little Ronnie Howard.
Oh
I
boy.
love
I
that.
think that
Yeah.
I agree with everything you guys are saying about Russell. And I think it's a mixture of all that stuff. It's just really interesting to see. I mean, I'm sure some of it is personal thing. A lot of his hits are with filmmakers he's worked with before that know how to quote unquote handle him and what have you. It's just really interesting because he's so big so fast, like Gladiator and Beautiful Mind and Master and Commander, and it's just like this guy can do no wrong, and then it just slowly kind of just dissipates into kind of
I
just fine movies, but like nothing, you
I
know.
think Master and Commander not being a huge success in its moment
Mm.
kind of
Yes,
broke him in a weird way
true.
because
It
that
broke
was
me too.
supposed yeah, that
That
was
was that
supposed
was
to
going to be a
be
franchise. Yeah.
that
We
was the
should
thing that
be
was yeah. Mhm.
on
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
20th Master and Commander movie, and
That
also
was
our
yeah.
fifth Nice Guys movie. Where's
Like
that franchise?
It's true. It's true.
and then
All that's true.
he kind of seems to split himself in two, which is like he does character parts in supporting and he does
Mhm.
like these lead parts that increasingly are just kind of like now he's playing the Pope's exorcist, which again, I love all exorcism movies. I don't think there's ever been a bad one. That's a
Right.
lie. But like those movies are fun, but they're also incredibly shoddy. There
Sure.
is a
Sure.
thing about him where when and this is I'm not trying to shame him, but like he's super ripped in Gladiator, and he is no longer interested in being super ripped because who has the time to be honest? But like it is this thing of he is now very much a character actor guy.
Yeah.
And, I think that has kind of thrown people because the Nice Guys, again, I fell asleep during that movie, but that's not the movie's fault. It was my fault. But
Yeah. You should
it's,
rewatch it sometime.
well, no,
Like
like
when
Libby loves it. So I'm sure that I will. But
great
like,
movie.
it's one of two movies I've fallen asleep in, and they're both like
Okay.
pretty good movies. But,
Oh, I
yeah.
fell asleep in 310 to Yuma. Oh, great film,
E.
because I accidentally got too drunk before we went to go see 310
Hey,
to Yuma, and then I took a little snoozeroo in the middle, and then I woke up and had a great time, and then I rewatched it again, and I was like, yes, my memory was correct. The 2/3 of the movie that I was awake for, plus the other third, great movie.
I I fell asleep in The Town and The Nice Guys for the exact same reason, which is I had flown out of Los Angeles very early, landed in New York, and then someone was like, "Let's go to a movie," and I was like, "Yes." And then we went to see those movies, and I fell asleep in the middle of them because I was so tired.
That's a
I
that's a
will
lot.
also say I think so. Russell Crowe has it basically said like he's not sober, but he's cut back a lot on drinking. He said he's given up dark drinks because he doesn't want to be exasperated with his children, which I think is an amazing way of putting it.
Yeah. I mean, we've all been there.
So,
Wait, so
there's that.
like, is a dark drink Guinness and rum stouts? Like, is that what was making him exasperated with
No idea.
a foamy stout?
Maybe he means like hard liquor.
Dark.
I really don't know. I think it's interesting. I think he basically he went 63 days without drinking to train for Cinderella Man. And then this is all just to say that I think he had a drinking problem for a while, and I think that was sort of feeding a lot of his issues, perhaps. But listen, all of this is to say, like, he's great in Gladiator. He deserved all of the accolades for it. Joaquin is great in this. I love that Joaquin kills his father in an embrace.
Yeah.
Like, there's just a lot of stuff in this movie. I know that there's, a whole slew of people doing rewrites and what have you, but like, there's something very sort of primal in this movie that I feel is a part of its success as well. In its DNA is just something very primal.
The BBC miniseries quality, I guess I'd call.
Yes.
Which is like, it feels very much like you could have done a version of this with no special effects, just like great actors emoting at each other on like a thing you stumbled upon at PBS at 5 in the evening one day. And that story would more or less work. It is like, again, it's that thing I was talking about where I'm kind of bored by the Roman politics aspect of it, but there's a seriousness to it that grounds the movie and makes the action scenes sing all the more. I think like a Tom Stoppard or somebody could have done a pass at the politics stuff in a way that made it a little bit more intriguing. But that might have come at the expense of something else. So yeah.
And I mean, I have questions. Why no one knows who Maximus is when he is a gladiator, even though he's been,
he wears a mask.
Okay, first of all, he wears a mask. It's not like they didn't have the internet or really like photos. So like, what were people supposed to know him from? Like coins or like a sketch?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I watched the theatrical version. I'm assuming we all did, right? None of us watched the extended version.
Probably not.
The extended version is like a half an hour longer, and it's apparently just a lot gorier. I just didn't feel it necessary to watch it, but I do, and even online, people are sort of like meh about it. I think everyone just sort of feels like the theatrical cut gets you what you need.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think the Colosseum stuff is just cool and fun, and I will say that the sequel understands that maybe even more so that it can go there more often, and it can like
pro shark. You're one of those
pro shark. Definitely pro shark.
Okay,
give me all the sharks.
Okay,
I think the sharks are so dumb, and that's
I agree.
I like them.
Would you like should Gladiator 3 just be Shark Gladiator?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean,
With an exorcism directed by Ron Howard.
I believe both of these projects were owned by DreamWorks. They should do remember when they were going to do like a combination Men in Black 21 Jump Street sequel?
Yes.
They should do a combination Shark Tale Gladiator sequel.
Yes.
Do you think Will's available for that, or like what do you think?
Probably.
Yeah.
I feel like we're days away from. I mean, I'm actually surprised that DreamWorks Animation hasn't started doing live action of their fucking movies. Like, why isn't that? I mean, I guess How to Train Your Dragon is starting. So there you go.
Yeah. I loved the quote from the director that was like, somebody was going to do it, so I figured I might as well, because he's like the director of the original. He was like, I knew I didn't want it to be super screwed up because I love that movie.
Fuck it.
Yeah.
That's what that sounds like to me.
Yeah, I mean, the Colosseum stuff is it's goofy in both of the movies. Like, I don't think that the Colosseum stuff in the first Gladiator is. I mean, is it less silly? Yes, we don't have sharks, sure, but like it's just as crazy.
But watching them, like, I don't know, reenact the Battle of Carthage, whatever it is that they're doing, like there's like an actual like important plot leader of men thing going on when he's like, we got to do this together, and like all like against all odds and blah blah blah, and like You've got Jimon Honsu there, who's like actually makes
true.
us feel like there's more than one person in that pit we care about.
Yeah.
And all that's going on, and like contrast that with Gladiator 2. I'm so sorry, but here we are back again.
No,
But it's like Paul Mescal and Pedro Pascal, two of my faves in an arena together, have a reason to fight, even though one doesn't want to in this all. And I'm feeling nothing from that. It's giving me nothing, no
I
emotion.
really thought they were gonna like team up and just like kill
In a
people.
in a better movie where Pedro Pascal is actually in the movie, yeah, they would have, but they didn't.
So what do you guys know about Nick Cave's Gladiator 2 script? Do you know
Oh, I
anything
know
about
so
this?
much, and I think it would have been great.
I
It
don't
would
know
have been incredible.
anything. Tell me,
So Nick Cave was commissioned to write a script.
is it all sharks?
If only.
It's a
I
shark.
can.
It's a combination Shark Tale Gladiator sequel.
Wow.
I will send you the PDF of it if you'd like to read it,
Okay.
because it is
No, but tell me
something else.
Tell me what it is.
But the long and short of it is that Maximus battles his way through the underworld and is resurrected for eternity and is sent to kill Jesus and his disciples.
Okay, I like the first part. I like the first part of like if Russell Crowe wanted to come back and fight his way through Hades, because he finds out that Lucius is actually his son.
Yeah.
Which is something I always assumed from the first Gladiator movie. But a lot of people
not put in
like,
text in the first one. Yeah.
I know, but a lot of people are like, "What is his retcon?" And I'm like, oh, I just always assumed that he was his kid.
I do too.
Okay. I'm glad we're on the same page. Anyway, if he's like, "Oh, I did have a living son," it would have been nice if someone had said that and decides to fight his way out of Hades in order to get back to his son.
Would watch.
Yeah.
And Connie Nielsen, sure, why not?
And then he should definitely have to kill Jesus, because that would have gotten butts in seats. That's a thing people famously love to see: the death of Christ.
We talked about the Passion of the Christ, and people really like to see him get hurt.
Why does he? Oh, because he's a Roman. Is that why he has to kill Jesus? Like, why? Just because? Like,
I'm trying to remember, Emily, what his motives were for killing Christ. But
I think it's because Nick Cave wrote the script. That's the motive for why he has to kill Christ.
That sounds right. So. That sounds right.
Does he have to use a shark to do it, or?
I mean,
if Maximus on a shark versus Jim Caviezel is Jesus.
Yeah, directed by Ron Howard. Yeah. I mean, listen, I think that this movie is not particularly like propulsive in plot wise. Like, I think that Gladiator and the sequel both are sort of like, people will talk in between gladiatorial battles and they'll say some stuff and there'll be some palace intrigue, but like for the most part, both these movies seem much more interested in battle and doing crazy shit.
I think in some ways the hand-to-hand combat is better in the sequel. This movie is very interested in a sort of, I call it late 90s, early 2000s editing style of getting so much coverage and then and like that. The sequel's a little less, it's not like it's not interested in that, but it's a little more able to just be like, here, these two guys are gonna fucking punch each other. Like, where I think, and Joanna, you really pointed to this, where I think this movie really succeeds is Djimon Hounsou as the character of Juba, who is like another face we care about. And the second movie kind of tries to do that, but then that guy just immediately is like, I'm gonna let this monkey bite me. By the way, every so often Libby just randomly types things at me in all caps as we're recording, and she just sent me, what was wrong with those monkeys? So
what's wrong with
those monkeys? She's asking the right questions.
Those monkeys were so upsetting, and in a like, what am I watching kind of way. Yeah, I mean, I think the Djimon Hounsou comp in Gladiator 2 is more the like doctor character, and I actually think the scenes between the doctor, his character's name is Ravi, between him and Paul Mescal's character was some of the best stuff in the movie, because Paul got to do what his normal people thing and not his Gladiator 2 thing. But when they make him like give big speeches, that, I'm not saying he's not capable of it, but I'm just saying it wasn't like that. He wasn't capable of it. So
he's got two big speeches at the end of the movie that just fell flat for me entirely.
There's a thing about Paul Mescal where I feel like the moments he's best in that movie are where he's a little bit more roguish, and I wish they'd written the character to be a little bit more Han Solo and a little bit less like a little, Maximus,
a little scamp,
a little
scampy.
Yeah. That's
I think that the there's one particular sort of there's a chariot race situation in the Colosseum at one point, where someone just gets straight up chopped in half, like just cut in half while straight up the score from Pirates of the Caribbean is playing. And I was just like, I kind of get why people were on this wavelength. Like what
Yeah.
people were jiving with is just something very kind of popcorn and big, and obviously made a boatload of money. This thing must have traveled quite well. I don't know what its worldwide versus domestic was, but I'm sure it did quite well overseas.
I'm
Which
gonna
is what
look
I
that up.
imagine do it. Which is what I imagine the sequel is going to do as well. I think it's actually probably going to do better overseas than it is going to do
It
domestically.
is doing well overseas. And was
More so
I've
than
had it.
Wicked will.
Uh,
Do you
yeah.
think
I don't,
Okay. So
Wicked's
this
not
may
going to be an international hit?
I don't know that it
Wicked's
will.
doing pretty well overseas, like
I mean,
currently.
isn't the stage show like hasn't the stage show toured internationally?
Mhm.
Oh,
They've heard
has
of
it?
Wicked? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
Uh,
yell at you, but musicals are something I care about, even though I think Wicked is just fine, you know? But
I'm not a huge Wicked
Did you,
person.
yeah.
speaking of just musicals very quickly, since obviously you're a theater kid, Joanna, did you see the
The
moment?
obviously that
Well, but you just you made it
yes,
sound that
yes,
way.
yes.
I guess I saw a video of it or TikTok of it of Ariana and Cynthia being interviewed by one of the actors from Avenue Q and them like
Yeah.
losing their
They lost their
minds.
minds and it was so
It
sweet.
was really sweet.
Oh
Yeah,
my
it was pretty
god.
great.
Yeah.
Avenue
I
Q, better
I
than Wicked.
I forever will be glad that Avenue Q won Best Musical over Wicked.
Pretty great.
Even
It's a
if
great little
Avenue
moment.
Q has aged very strangely, I don't think it's aged poorly, it's just aged
Yeah.
strangely.
Yeah.
They still sing George Bush is only for now, which is very funny to me. I think actually it's no longer showing, but I
What was the Gladiator overseas
Gladiator
numbers?
Gladiator did 187.7 domestic and it did 277.8 internationally. So yes,
Okay.
it
Yeah.
outperformed internationally. I
It.
think
Yeah.
I'm
Please.
thinking about how much Hollywood tried to copy this because it's a big hit.
Mm,
And they were like, let's do more swords and sandals. Let's do Bible films. Let's do all this stuff.
yes.
I think more than anything else, what killed us was 9/11. Because suddenly after 9/11,
Mm,
you have to acknowledge the politics of this era in a way that you because like
mm,
Kingdom of Heaven is a movie about like religious crusades and like the ways that religions use
yeah.
people up. And that's why I think it's a better film ultimately in the director's cut at least. And yet, it's the kind of movie that was just not as viscerally exciting as this. And it does sort of feel like we are getting back to a place where you can do this sort of thing. But it is like, yeah, if you want to talk about this
Yeah.
period of history, if you want to talk about the rise of these like different religions, it kind of ends up bumping into this uncomfortable thing of like, how are you going to acknowledge, even in this movie, the internal politics of Rome are like very driven by conquest and territory and empire in a way that I think played more innocuous in 2000 than it would have even like 2 years later.
Yeah. Um among
Mm,
the Gladiator imitators,
yes.
do you have a favorite? And is it the King Arthur where Keira Knightley plays a sassy Celtic archer?
Oh, I love Kira.
That movie's crazy.
I think my favorite movie that sort of follows in the footsteps of Gladiator, and this is a swerve, is Pirates of
Mm,
the Caribbean. I think it's the movie that kind of like found a way to like have its cake and eat it too.
sure. Sure.
By playing in this sort of long dead genre, but not having to acknowledge like history. It could just be like, here's a movie about some pirates doing things. If I have to like stick a little bit more cleanly to
Swords
um
and sandals.
Swords and Sandals, I might say Alexander, the Oliver Stone movie.
Yeah.
You guys love Alexander? Are you a pro Alexander
No. Well, no.
podcast?
No. 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 Don't
Love,
love,
but I am
but
generally
but
pro. Yeah.
I
Interesting.
don't love it, but there's something very interesting about it. Now, I wish that we got Baz Luhrmann's over Oliver Stone's because I just think that that would have been more fun. I think Oliver Stone's is too ponderous and is just kind of all over the place. But I mean, I don't hate Troy. I mean, I don't love Troy, but I haven't watched it in a long time, so maybe it would age better.
I think you should
Yeah.
watch it and become a Troy boy. I think that should be
A Bannerhead.
yeah.
It is interesting because I'm looking at this list of what at least online is crediting as sort of the revival that came out of Gladiator. So you had Troy, King Arthur, Alexander, 300, Kingdom
Mm.
of Heaven. Um, I mean, 300 is a movie that obviously
Exists.
exists, and I'm not a fan of it per se, but I do remember seeing that in the theaters, and it did play like gangbusters. Like it did hit a moment where I don't know.
I like
It's I don't know.
I like Orlando Bloom generally. I think he's kind of disastrous in Kingdom of Heaven, and that's why that movie
Mhm.
wasn't a bigger success. But if you had a Russell Crowe-ish person, I think Russell Crowe's all wrong for the lead role of Kingdom of Heaven, but
Sure.
like that movie to me is like one great lead performance away from being a Best Picture contender. The
Brad
director's
Pitt.
cut again, no, I don't know.
Um,
Yeah.
Phil, if you like 300, you can
I
like 300 with your
I don't
whole chest. You just gave this sort of like very bashful, like, I don't know, played well in the theater. I don't know. You could just love
no.
300. You could be like, I
I
love,
wouldn't.
I love to watch men with their abs all greased up,
Those
you
abs.
know?
the
Like,
the shame I guess that you felt I was radiating was
yeah.
more about like trying to be even remotely positive about Zack Snyder, a guy who I don't ride for.
I think
And so
what I love about Zack Snyder is that for a while there, every movie he made was slightly worse than the last one, and like I just liked that career
and let me
trajectory.
tell you, I can't wait to see what he has to say about the LAPD in his next Netflix film because I'm sure that that will be great.
I kind of
Um,
want to watch his weird Star Wars ripoffs because I'm sure
Rebel
they're.
Moon.
really?
I don't think they're good. I don't think I'm gonna like them.
Don't
But you
watch
know how
him.
sometimes I like to watch things that are
I
bad. That's
know.
how I feel about
Well,
it.
you know what? If you're gonna watch them, you got to watch the Snyder cuts of both of them if you're gonna
Oh
do it.
fuck yes. I where every day, almost every day, I go to work at a
Uh,
coffee shop where like
mm,
they just display random shit on this
mhm,
screen, and it's the
sure.
one day it was they watched Chinatown and they followed it up with a fourth season episode of the CBS procedural Bull. What was like the connective tissue there? I don't know.
Anyone's guess.
I one day the
Yes.
person who was searching for the next thing to watch was typing Snyder Cut, spelling it Snider into Netflix, and Netflix
Mm.
couldn't find it because, of course, the Snyder Cut is on Max. And I did not go up to say that because I was like, I don't need this in my life right now. And so instead, they started watching The Little Mermaid. So,
What is this
A
place?
great SAG. Don't give away your
Yeah.
secrets. Don't give away your secrets on the
Yeah.
pod.
Yeah.
But tell us off air. Also, like,
yeah.
oh, to be a barista who gets to program
And they like
at
have
the coffee shop, you know?
they have every streaming service. And then a couple weeks ago, there was some movie on. I was like, I didn't know this was on streaming. And the guy said, we just bought a Blu-ray player. And I was like, yes.
You know what you need to get
Next
them?
level.
You know what you really need to get them? A VHS player. Because
Oh,
there was a
Whoa.
bar in this town that I used to live in, and they had a VHS player and like a shelf of, and they would just play like Krull and like
yeah.
all, just like all this nonsense on the wall of this bar, and I was just like, is this heaven?
The
Can I just
only
Oh,
say
it's
that
Iowa.
yes, please go ahead. Sorry, Emily.
No, no, no.
the
Yeah.
I love a good lobster roll. It's hard to find a lobster roll in LA, and the only place that has a good one is in Grand Central Market here downtown, and they have a little like a TV with a built-in VCR that sits on their counter. So as you're waiting for your lobster roll, which takes a while, they're just showing like weird 90s movies on VHS. I rewatched a healthy portion of the Flintstones there.
Yeah.
Like this is yeah, I think
The
I need to buy
portion.
them. I think I need to buy them a VCR for
Yes.
this coffee shop.
What I was gonna say, Joanna, is that this is the second Kroll reference that I've had in the last week
Wow.
because I recorded an episode for our Patreon where we've been doing, or I've been doing, Michael Crichton's '90s films with Tom Meissen as my co-host, and we had on Katie McGrath, an actor in her own right, for
Yeah.
Disclosure, a movie that
Yeah.
is terrible and has
It
aged incredibly
exists.
poorly.
Yeah.
She just kept talking about Crow and how much she loves Crow, and I was just like, okay. She's like, you need to watch it and get back to me, and I was like, because I've never seen Crow, so I don't know. Kroll heads, speak up because
Really?
Ask me
apparently
when you watch
I will. I will. I absolutely will.
It is
I
really expensive to buy a VCR. This is so annoying.
But I bet
yeah,
they
because
have them
it's
at
dead
like,
tech
but don't they
Oh,
have them at like a local Salvation Army
or
or something
here
like
eBay.
we
that?
And
go.
you just like,
Here we go. I'm on eBay and I found one for
yeah,
$15, but it doesn't have
there
a
it is.
remote, so you can't use it.
Can you
Perfect.
physically go up? Because you have to push the tape in anyway.
Yeah, I think you could physically push the
Yeah.
buttons. Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Let's rate this film.
Oh.
Joanna, when you saw this film in 2000, 0 to 99 of what you thought back in 2000 and then where you are today.
Okay. Before I answer that, can you give me some comps of like what would you rate what have you rated other movies on this podcast?
Well, you know what? We can go first, and then that could give you some context.
Maybe. Okay.
Or I could just say that, like, where do we land on Chocolat, Emily?
I generally think of 50 as the dividing line. If you're under 50, you're not recommending. If you're over it, you're recommending it. I kind of place it in my head as like a 5-star scale. Every 10 is a new half star.
Okay.
But yeah, it's Chocolat. I think I ended up in the like 40s. So
I think I ended up around there as well. I mean, I think that I'll go first on this film, which is that in 2000, I saw this movie and I liked it fine. It didn't blow me away. I certainly, similar to you, Emily, back in 2000, was either riding for traffic, or I probably was in the camp for traffic, or maybe Crouching Tiger. Subsequently, now I'm like torn between Crouching Tiger and Aaron Brockovich, which I think is a perfect movie, and I absolutely adore Aaron Brockovich. So I would say for this movie in 2000, I was around a 70. Like, I thought it was fine. It was a solid movie. I got why my friends were into it, whatever. I actually like it more now. Watching it the other day, I was able to get more on its wavelength. I had a better time with it. And I think I'm at like an 82, 84, something in that range, where I'm going to say 82. I'm going to stick at 82. Like, I think I understand its success more now than I did back in the day. And with a little bit of distance, and also the fact that we've seen, as we've mentioned, a whole plethora of movies come in its wake that aren't as good as it in a lot of ways, makes this movie seem a lot better. So that's where I'm at. What about you, Emily?
I think when I saw this back then, I probably would have been like, I liked to reflect critical consensus. So I probably would have been like 81. I had a good time with it. By the time the Oscars rolled around, I probably would have been like a 15, because this movie, I was like, oh, it can't win. It's terrible. Yeah, personal vendetta. And now, I since coming to terms with my gender, that's such a like painful way to put it. I've been like, I'm now more fascinated by movies that are like boy classics, because I can watch like a movie like Heat. Now I will watch and be like, oh, this is a movie about how boys are weird. Before, I didn't quite get it because I was not a boy and like I was struggling with that. Now I can be like, boys are weird. Gladiator, big boys are weird movie. I'm gonna be 75. I think it works. I think it is maybe not my pick of those movies, but I'm not mad at one Best Picture in the slightest. And I'll rank the sequel too. I think the sequel's like a 68. It's very fun, but it's kind of dumb.
So I would say back in the day, Joanna would have given this like an 85.
Right.
And now I think I agree with Emily. I would say 75.
Okay.
And then the sequel, nobody asked me to do this, but I'm gonna do it.
No, please, yeah.
I would say 60. But most of that is Denzel.
And the Sharks. Not to put words in your mouth. Joanna, curious, what is your ranking of the 5 Best Picture nominees in 2000?
Yeah, so it's number 1, Crouching Tiger, number 2, Traffic, number 3, Chocolat. No, just kidding. Number 3, Aaron Brockovich. Number 4, Gladiator. Number 5, Chocolat.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that doesn't put Chocolat at the bottom is a monster.
It's Judi Dench. And listen, if Judi Dench wants to rate her Chocolat performance as number 1 that year, who are we to stop her?
Oh boy. Emily?
Number one, Chocolat. Number 2, Chocolat. Number 3. It encompasses all. It encompasses all. It does. I mean, okay, so it's for me, it's kind of like 3 tiers.
Sure.
4 tiers, honestly. Tier 1 is timeless masterpiece, one of the greatest films ever made, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Then you drop down a little bit and it's like Steven Soderbergh was sure having a year. That's the next tier. And I'm gonna rank Traffic slightly ahead of Aaron Brockovich, although I think they're both terrific and both worth watching, and like really a great window into the American film industry in the year 2000. The next tier is Gladiator. I'm just going to call it Gladiator. And the final tier is I don't understand why this was nominated, and that's Chocolat.
Okay,
I like the top four movies
sure.
from Just Fine to I think this is a masterpiece, and I think they're all worth watching. And Chocolat is kind of interesting if you don't mind watching a movie that's not very good.
Yeah, I well, yeah. Chocolat is just, I mean, it is just what happens when Harvey Weinstein is afforded, you
I
know.
so I read the Joanne Harris book the
Oh,
Chocolat is
okay.
based on, like,
Okay.
back in the day when
Yeah,
I was like and I really like the book, and I think that Julie, but like, it's a real wine mom book, but I did enjoy it. And then I think I would genuinely watch Juliette Binoche do anything, and if one of those
yeah.
things is like tasting chocolate, I'm not that mad about it. But when Johnny
Sure.
Depp rolls up with a Irish question mark accent, I have I have issues with that movie. A lot of them.
Would you take, I hope that, I mean, we'll see, but is Julia Binoche getting an Oscar nomination? A little crazy, wouldn't you say, Joanna?
I would. I would. I would.
Yeah. Who did she, we had someone that she
We
beat.
had
Oh, Michelle
it's
Yeoh. Yeah,
Michelle Yeoh. We were like,
yeah, that's
Michelle
insane.
Yeoh is, yeah, it's wild that
It's
she was nominated.
crazy that Julia Binoche gets it. But um, so next week we are starting a brand new miniseries next week.
Mm.
It's our Christmas miniseries. We're calling it "Tis the Damn Season" for obvious reasons. Um, yes, Emily, you look like you were gonna
I was going
throw
to
shade.
interject, and then I decided
Um,
not to because it's the
I-
spirit of the season.
oh, that's
How
very sweet of you.
giving of you.
Next week we are doing the Polar Express with Emma Stefanski. Do you have any thoughts on the Polar Express? Because your face, if everyone could see Joanna's eyes just
Hot,
bulged.
hot, hot chocolate, hot, hot.
I
Emily,
I
spoiler, loves the hot chocolate musical
Oh,
sequence.
I
I
love everything.
I think my personal vendetta, if you will, against Bob Zemeckis, a certain era of Bob Zemeckis, has been made quite clear, I think, already on this
I think it's
podcast.
still happening, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yes. I still want to throw everything that Bob Zemeckis has done in the trash, but I would like to throw a lot of it in the trash. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we're talking Polar Express next week with Emma Stefanski. Our mini series will be the Polar Express, then the Holiday, and then everyone's favorite, the Family Man.
Hey,
The
Fun.
a
No,
hit
that's fun.
movie.
That's fun.
the
Yeah.
Family Man is legitimately an amazing episode of just Emily and I trying to come up with a better version of the Family Man.
I kind of love The Family Man, and
I
like
know you do.
there's Libby and I are sort of like trying to prepare a document for our manager of like, here's some ideas we have, here's things we'd love to adapt, and I'm gonna put The Family Man.
And then to wrap up our year, every year now we're going to be doing a chaos pick, and we're going to be watching, or sorry, releasing our episode on The Cat in the Hat, the Mike Myers Nightmare Fuel movie, so that everyone can ring in the new year. with,
What are you doing to yourself?
I
You're at the end of a tough year. You're like, let's do Polar Express
it,
and Cat in the Hat.
Phil,
yes, Emily?
well, we recorded most of these episodes before the
They're
election
all
time.
recorded. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Except for Cat in the Hat, which came after the election. But I was talking a 21-year-old asked to interview
Yes.
me for a project that she was
Oh
doing.
no! Did you bring up the Cat in
I
the
was
Hat?
just like, we were talking about how comedy to some extent, especially TV comedy, requires a status quo, and like you need to have a thing to build off of. And I brought up the Cat in the Hat as an example, and I said, take the Cat in the Hat, and she said, classic film, and I was like, no.
This is like when I had this moment because I just didn't know, I hadn't talked to the children. I when The Force Awakens opened, I did a piece for VF about this theater where I grew up, which was like George Lucas's favorite movie theater, and like the
Yeah.
generations of people who had stood in line at that theater for various Star Wars films. And there were like people at this opening night of The Force Awakens who had like met in line for one of the original films and got married and had kids, and it was like this whole thing. And then the children were there, and it was like the young teens, and they were like, Phantom Menace,
Mhm.
now that's pod racing. And I was like, what? And I just had I like learned that that
Yeah.
if you're of a certain age, you love the prequels. And if you're a certain
Yeah.
age, you love Cat in the Hat.
I like
I
like
so depressing.
I realized that movie, it came out when she was literally a baby. So
Yeah.
she saw it like later. And again, I think the like funny movies you see when you're like 6, 7 are like so cement your idea of a sense of humor that like it's very impossible to not see them in a way that like someone who didn't see them until their 40s, which was the case with me, will approach them.
Well, I also get so curmudgeonly because we're of an age where it just makes my bone marrow want to disintegrate into like how old I am when I'm like, well, there was a whole period of my life when there was only the Haley Mills Parent Trap, or there's a whole period of my life where there was only the Winona Ryder Little Woman. There's a whole period of my life where we only watched the animated Grinch, and that was the better one, and those are all the better ones, and like and then you just like you have to acknowledge the passage of time.
I have reached a point in my life where I'm just like I am when the millennial generation, which Joanna and I belong to, was ascendant in the criticism world. We had all these movies that we sort of like reclaimed, and some of them, like genuinely, I glad we did that, and some of them were hocus pocus. And it's like, it's this thing where young people come up and they have their own canon and they assert that canon on the actual canon, and the good movies stay and the bad ones fall away. And sometimes there are movies in the canon that need to come out. And like it is ultimately just sort of the thing that generations do, and people in their 20s are always advocating for some bullshit they saw when they were 5. And it's like, just it is this ongoing constant process. And I've learned to make my peace with it. I no longer care. You know what? If Cat in the Hat ends up becoming a part of the established film canon, fine, but I don't think it's going to. I don't think it's got the goods. I don't think it's got what it takes. But there are other movies that young people have really pushed that I'm like, oh yeah, that was better than I thought it was at the time. Or that's, I finally watched that and I'm like, that works.
And I really agree with you. What you just said makes so much sense in the world. And here's the last thing I'm going to say on this Gladiator pod.
Yes.
One should not be forced to watch Hocus Pocus every year at Halloween. It does not support that frequency of a rewatch.
I agree.
How do you really feel though, Joanna? That's the question.
It's a fine movie, but I don't want to watch it every year. That's such a bonkers thing to do. Oh my God.
I agree. Joanna, are there podcasts you would like to plug that people can hear the dulcet tones of your voice more frequently?
Shrieking about Hocus Pocus? Sure. You can hear me shriek about many things on Trial by Content, where we just did 3 weeks of Denzel Washington. Well, I don't know when this is coming out. We did a bunch of Denzel Washington.
It's coming out on Friday.
Okay, great. We did 3 weeks of Denzel Washington movies. And then you could hear me on House of R, where we cover a lot of like geeky fandom stuff. Prestige TV, where I cover the absolute dearth of Prestige TV that is going on right now on our televisions, and other Ringer properties.
And also, don't forget to check out Joanna and my Hocus Minute, which is a minute-by-minute podcast about the film Hocus Pocus. We have reached minute 45.
Hocus Minute is incredible.
And in minute 45, just need you to know, this is when Thora Birch, for the 20th time, makes fun of her brother for being a virgin.
Also, people can check out, as I mentioned earlier, the Patreon, where I talk about the films of the 90s. I'm currently doing a miniseries with Tom Meissen on Michael Crichton's 90s next week, Twister, with Tom Meissen's better half, actor Charlotte Coy. We'll be talking Twister, arguably the best film of Michael Crichton's 90s. Because it ain't Congo.
What about Jurassic Park?
We're not clumping in it because we did it in the box.
Okay, I got it. Gotcha.
So it's Rising Sun, it's Disclosure, Congo, Twister, Lost World, and Sphere.
I think I prefer Lost World to Twister, but those are the two standouts. Yeah.
Interesting.
In the trailer for Congo.
Yes.
Tim Curry's reading on the wall and it goes, "We are watching you."
That's in hieroglyphs.
Just like, oh my God.
I think Congo is a camp classic, having watched it for the first time last week. Amy drinks a martini. She smokes a cigar. It's an incredible movie.
Congo number 1.
God damn it. Yeah, I mean, listen, it's been a wild ride. I've learned a lot about Michael Crichton, who unfortunately was a climate change denier. There's a lot of stuff about him that I'm just oh boy.
His politics are
His later books You know, his original books
Yeah.
are like, I travel the world, I studied to be a doctor, I'm so
Yeah.
interesting, blah blah. And then he was just sort of like, also,
Yeah.
guess what's not real?
It's
Global
just,
warming.
yeah, it's a lot of he was a weird guy. But yeah, so people can listen to that. Joanna, thank you for taking the time
Thanks for having me.
to
Thanks for
come back.
allowing us to not be on topic for a lot of this.
Oh my God, are you kidding? I'd expect
And
nothing less.
if you and Emily and Libby want to write a shark exorcism movie for Ron Howard to direct, I'll be first in line. So thanks so much.
Great.
It's gonna be an amazing movie. You're the best. Thank you so much for doing this. And we will talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.